David O'Rourke, the boss here at Approved Boats in Southampton, was having a chat with Tony Castro. He's the designer of Galley and yachts, and they were talking about where the future of recreational boating in the UK might lie. They talked about extra stability, extra running efficiency, extra internal space and volume. So what they were talking about essentially was powercats. Now David's gone to Aquila. That's a US brand owned by MarineMax but built in China. And right in the middle of their range they have this. It's called the 32 Sport. Now, one of the most critical things about any powercat is, of course, the beam. Now, Aquila has a range of about 7 boats, and at the top end, the top 3 boats, they're called the luxury yacht line. The 44-footer, for instance, has a beam approaching 22 feet, 50% of its LOA. And that's huge, that's quite traditional for a cat. Here, we've gone for something more approachable, something perhaps more appealing to the traditional monohull fan. So it's got a beam of 12'8". On a 32-foot monohull, you might expect a beam of 10 foot, so it's large by monohull standards. Relatively compact by cat standards, but you still have loads of space at this back end. Because you've got separation of the 2 engines, one on either hull, you've got an excellent central section with a telescopic ladder that folds right out. And it's a great little station for water sports and for summer fun. Not least because you've got this pair of proper grab handles to pull yourself out. It's very safe and user-friendly part of the boat. When you move further forward, we've also got a clever little touch here with little gates that you can relocate quite easily just by pulling them up and fitting them back in. So you can keep your kids nice and secure and contained within the cockpit. And it's the same here in the centre and the same at the port side by the shore power. Now, aside from the stability at rest when you're walking around on the boat, the first thing you notice in here is not just the scale of the cockpit, the size of the beam, but how that's actually very profitably used. And if we look over here at the starboard side, and by the way, these kind of mirror one another, we've got this seating section, relatively small to starboard, slightly larger to port, but they operate in the same way. So if we just release the catch at the back here and get rid of our gate, shift a couple of marketing cushions, we should be able to lift this right up. Let's have a go. There we are. So that folds right open, gives you tremendous access. You can actually climb down inside the hull. You can inspect your electrics, your battery, your various bits of cabling, all nicely labelled and routed. It's very impressive actually. And it's the same in the other side, except you've got an additional bank of leisure batteries. Equally easy to get to, and if you want to use it for storage, it's perfectly possible to do so. It doesn't come with compartmentalised storage units, but there's plenty of space, as you can see, to chuck down things like this bow cushion infill without cluttering everything up. Now beyond that, we have another couple of neat little tricks. If I move some more cushions, on this port side we've got this little bit that opens up here, folds out an infill which is built in, so you don't have to go ferreting around for it, and straight away you got yourself a proper lounger instead of just a dining station. But talking about that dining station, of course, it does open up in the conventional fashion. The quality feels pretty high, I have to say. Everything's very well built, particularly the various stainless steel fittings around here. If I move this out of the way, I particularly like this section over to starboard. It's worth mentioning that all the cushion tops are on cantilevers, so you can basically access all of the under-seat storage spaces without having to remove the cushions, which is a great touch, very handy. So you just give it a little pull and out it comes just like that. And on this starboard side, this is basically a huge cool box. So you whack your ice in there, it's got a nice drain, Stick all your beer in there, and it's very, very easy to reach. And actually, while I'm talking about the various spaces underneath the seats, it's worth looking inside the port gunnel too, because there's usually a redundant space, but you see how thick it is on this occasion, and that space is well used too. Let's fold this up out of the way, get myself around the back here. You simply pull this open, you've got a neat little selection of 4 cup holders, and the space in here is absolutely vast. It goes right from this back edge all the way forward to the leading edge of the co-pilot's seat. It's deep, it's regularly spaced, and it's absolutely huge for fenders, for life jackets, you name it, whatever you want to put in there. As you move further forward in the cockpit, there's more to like. There's more super over-engineered stainless steel everywhere you look. There's also to port where the co-pilot's seat is, because you've got twin helm seats to starboard. You can convert this too, just shift the bolster down, shift the backrest over, and you've got a nice aft facing position to face your mates at the table, or to look after a skier, whatever you like. To starboard, directly beneath the unit that supports the helm seats, we've got more storage. There's a hastily stowed shore power cable in there that spoils the view, I'm afraid, but it's very deep. Now all these bits of deck furniture, incidentally, they're not moulded into the deck, they're bolted down to the deck, and they're elevated on legs, which I can only assume is something to do with easing the passage of water as it runs aft. But I don't really get the concept behind it, but there they are. It's not as though this boat lacks storage capacity, so it's no problem at all. And as I say, the quality feels very good, and that continues when you move past the helm, which we'll talk about later when we're out on the water, to this galley station. I call it a galley station because it feels a bit more substantial than your regular wet bar for a 32-footer. We obviously have the grill here with a heat resistant hot plate, so you could shut it down while it's still warm. Let's move the champagne bucket out of the way. We also have the conventional sink. It's a good sized sink, this actually. A rather nice touch. This kind of heavyweight marble style worktop can be fitted on top of this neat little circular knob on the top of the console to keep it nice and secure when you're underway. There's a good grab handle here as well, plus a deep fridge with a small freezer compartment, and also a bin directly next to that. Now, some people do favour the ice maker instead of the fridge, but realistically, for UK use, the fridge with mini freezer is a more effective use of space. Now, as we move past the door to starboard for the heads and shower compartment, past the door to port for the cabin, we reach up a little step, the bow space, and there's immediately some useful thinking here as well. I mean, we've got the flip over screen and the wind deflector there to keep you nice and warm and sheltered in the cockpit. We've also got this neat little deck drain to stop any water that comes inboard over the bow from reaching you further aft. And when you get up here, of course, being a cat, the sheer scale of the space, particularly the beam, is very impressive. There's easily space here for 2 people to sit facing forward and really enjoy themselves with the cup holders and so on. It's a very comfortable place to be. There's an additional space to starboard, and we see these kind of cool looking carbon fibre style cup holders, plenty of those, about 7 of them in fact up here in the bow. And as we have a look further forward, again we've got huge storage spaces. They're kind of symmetrical on either side, and in the centre of course the windlass, which makes perfect sense. I would like to see, because it's just free flowing and unbroken underneath, I'd like to see this windlass section compartmentalised, such that, you know, your chain and your line and so on doesn't interfere with your baggage on either side. But there's no doubt in the scale of the space, and also there's no doubt in the quality of the fit out when you look at the through bolting for these sunken cleats. It's absolutely insane. I mean, they are just huge things. Very impressive. There are no self-tappers on this boat. But what's really interesting here is not so much how the storage spaces are used at the very forepeak, if you can call it that on a cat. It's the spaces underneath these seats. On the port side, there's just capacity below decks for the port cabin. On the starboard side, we do have, I don't know if I can open this, it was misbehaving a touch earlier. Let's get that off. Incidentally, these cushions that do have to be removed are fastened with rubber bungs, which keeps them quite neatly in place without having to fight with them. So look at that. I mean, on the starboard side, we've got a space kind of the scale of a third of a cabin, really. It's absolutely enormous. So that's great for storage. Further aft here, inside the console, we've got the head and shower compartment. So let's go and have a look at that and see how that's used. So on the starboard side, we step down, and it's certainly nice and deep. There's plenty of headroom, some good light from above and from the side, with a toilet and a good space. And as you sit, you get a decent view of the horizon. So it's a very relaxing sort of spot. And obviously with the shower fitting, it's a very usable wet room. But what we also get, and what you don't really expect, is a full walk-in electrics room after that. Now personally, and I love the feature. It's, you know, essentially what you usually get is a little dash panel you pull off on the back of a dash and just access the various bits of wiring, which is a bit rudimentary. So it's impressive to have. I wouldn't personally stick it directly next to a wet room. You know, it doesn't make any practical sense to me. But as David rightly points out, this is not a cruising boat. This is not an overnighting boat particularly. This is a day boat with loads of storage and a little bit of accommodation. And of course, because you've got that extra storage in the bow to starboard, you could feasibly have used this space as a central atrium to separate off a heads compartment and shower room from the electrics room, but that hasn't been done. So what we have is lots and lots of extra storage over there to starboard. And of course, it's asymmetrical. On the port side, we have the cabin, and that runs all the way. Let's just rearrange our co-pilot seat. That runs all the way under that bow deck to port, as you can see. It's actually significantly more spacious than these cushions allow it to look. If I shift a couple of these, you know, there's a good length in there. There's a good length in there for at least a 6-footer. You know, the infringement of the bow mouldings for the front of the console and the seating area will probably encourage you to sleep with your head aft. But you have to say, with shelving, a bit of storage under here, a bit of storage inside here, and a little electrics panel so you feel in control of the boat even when you're down below, it's a very serviceable place for the odd night on board. But as David rightly points out, this is a bonus. It's not what the boat's all about. This boat is all about a huge open upper deck and really generous recreational day boating. The portside co-pilot seat is a really good place to be. We've got the bolster as standard, so you can perch yourself upright, and when you do so, you can jam your feet against the cabin access door. That's nice and sturdy, so it feels very comfortable. And we've got these uprights that stop your feet sliding in either direction, so that's nice. We've also got the big stainless steel grab handle here, and a built-in footrest there as well. So there are all kinds of very comfortable ways for you to sit in this space. And of course, because you've got that huge beam, and because you've got the screen quite a long way forward to enable access to the cabin on the port side and the heads on the starboard side, it feels tremendously spacious. Now, when we move across to the helm station, again, lots of good stainless steel grab handles to enable you to do that in safety, even when the seas are a bit lumpy. Now over here, we've got more of those carbon fibre style cup holders instead of the stainless ones. We've also got our joystick control. We've currently got this sitting here on Skyhook, which does a great job with these outboard engines of keeping us exactly where we want to be. Now, as regards the dash itself and the ergonomics of the helm position, it's very, very natural. Everything falls exactly where you would want it. You've got a moulded foot brace for your feet there. Again, bolsters as standard. Grab handles everywhere. We also have a good bit of space here for an additional chart plotter. You can easily move the Mercury display down onto the dash here. So there's all sorts of things you could do with the space available to you. We've also got fore and aft sliding mechanism for the helm seats, the twin helm seats. And we've got adjustability for the wheel as well. So all in all, a very comfortable sort of position. But of course, with a powercat, what we really want to do is get her up and underway and see how she really feels. So let's disengage the sky hook. Let's have a little look around and let's get ourselves underway. Now, first and foremost, apart from that low down grunt which you get with these twin 300s, that's an option by the way, they would tend to come with 225s or 250s. We scoot straight up onto the plane. We're doing 20 knots already and it feels very flat, it feels very level. I've already had a bit of a play in this boat actually, and quite naturally as you increase the speed, what you would tend to do on any equivalent monohull is to trim out a little. But if you do trim out, as I am here, what you tend to get quite quickly is an element of porpoising, where the bow nips up and down and just won't quite behave itself. In short, this is not a boat that wants you to trim her out. This is a boat where you just trim her in, she runs flat, she runs level, and there's actually, from a helmsman's position, very little for you to really do. And that's, I guess that's a good and a bad thing. Depends what you want from your day out on a boat. Of course, because you've got twin hulls, we don't need trim tabs because it's self-leveling. With the buoyancy on both sides, no need for trim tabs, so we don't have that to play with. And because it doesn't really appreciate too much in the way of trim on the legs, we don't have that to play with. So what we have here is a wheel and a throttle and a boat that pretty much drives itself. And that makes it tremendously novice friendly, of course. You know, if you love the idea of elevating that nose in a nasty following sea, surfing down the swells, or pinning it into a head seat, really enjoying yourself and feeling like the boat is an extension of what you're doing at the helm, this is probably not the boat for you. But it's very, very easy to drive. And if we, I was going to say heel her into a turn, of course that doesn't happen. She heels, but in the other direction. So she heels out. And because of the rigorous grip from those twin hulls, you find yourself sliding down that way a little, so you need to brace your feet. Very comfortable though, very easy. And what's also interesting is the running efficiency. Now even with these twin 300s on the back, we've got I think 530 litre tanks, so 1,060 litres of fuel. Now when we're running at 40 knots, at the moment we're doing 35, but if we're running at 40 knots, we're looking at about 180, 190 litres per hour in terms of fuel flow combined. So if you do some very simple maths, that gives you 5 hours, 5 hours of pretty easy running, which takes you up to what, a range of 200 nautical miles even at 40 knots, with a good margin for error left in the tank. I'll just turn her to port. And again, loads of grip. Richard, my cameraman, seems to be struggling not to fall over. Doing a great job there, Richard. And rather than heeling in, we heel out. And this time I'm sliding slightly towards the throttle. And it, you know, at first, for a monohull fan, it could be a touch disconcerting, but there's nothing at all to worry about. As I say, this boat is extremely novice friendly, and it's also quite soft riding. There's no sea state around today, but there is a boat up ahead, so we'll have a little bounce over his wake, just a gentle bounce. And rather than the slamming that you can get if you show the wrong angle of a monohull to a bit of a wake, we just slice through it, and there's a kind of graduated buoyancy where you sink a little at the bow, but it restrains that and keeps you nice and level without actually feeling that impact through your backside. One of the things I forgot to mention is how practical this kind of boat is for all different kinds of recreation. Now obviously it's great for parties. It's got all that deck space, all that internal volume, all those seats, the capacity potentially to carry 22 people at a time if you happen to have that many friends. Not sure I do. But also if you enjoy a bit of estuary cruising, you like to beach your boat, well it's great for that because you've got the twin hulls that comes nicely ashore, and also a boat of this size, a monohull, you'd tend to have a draft around about a metre. The draft here is only about 65 centimetres, so about a foot shallower. And that makes it perfect for cruising up the estuaries, beaching and having a little picnic, just using your boat in all kinds of ways that perhaps with a monohull you might not. Clearly then, this Aquila 32 Sport is a really tempting proposition. There's space for almost a couple of dozen people to sit on board. There's storage everywhere you look. The stability is brilliant wherever you choose to roam. It's soft riding, it's well suited to a whole range of applications. The styling is also extremely impressive by cat standards, and with twin hulls and joystick control, that driving experience is about as novice friendly as you could ever wish to see. But of course, however mono friendly the Aquila might be, it's still a cat, and so it retains some of the flaws you tend to associate with that. Its accommodation is limited by the breadth of those hulls. Its profile is inevitably defined as much by the sheer breadth of its beam as it is by the clever styling tricks they've used. The Helm experience might also feel a touch one-dimensional for keen drivers, and then of course there's the price. Now this boat comes in at a VAT inclusive price just in excess of £458,000, and by monohull standards that sounds extremely expensive. But you have to remember that at approved boats the starting price is not a base price to which you add 1,000 options, it's for a high-spec boat from which you then deduct the elements you don't need. Now, I don't know whether David and Tony are right that cats are the future of recreational boating in the UK, but they're certainly right that space, stability and efficiency remain right at the heart of the modern decision-making process. So whether you're a keen cat fan or a monohull fan, and whether you feel a connection with this boat or entirely uninspired by it, it's very easy indeed to recognise the value of what this new cat brings to the market.